Welcome to the MFS Wellness Podcast, a hybrid structure encompassing health, fitness, self-improvement, and entertainment, where no topic is off limits and all opinions are graciously welcomed.
Let's get on with the show!
And now, here's the host of the show, Mike Sinopoli.
Welcome to the MFS Wellness Podcast. I am Mike Sinopoli, certified nutrition coach, consultant, counselor, call me whatever you would like. On this episode, I'm going to throw it in a little different direction here. Health and wellness, that can incorporate a lot of things. It's not just macronutrients and strength training and everything else you're seeing on Instagram. There's more to life than that. There's family, there's our mental health, but there's also a sense of religion, purpose, and spirituality, for lack of a better term. Some things that are just a little bit greater than what's viewed and tangible in our fear-based world. So I brought in a friend of mine. Her name is Susan Jablonski, and she's a delivery nurse at a hospital. She's a police wife, somebody I greatly respect. And most importantly here, in the whole premise of this episode, is that she has recently been saved by Christ. And that's something that's intrigued me very much so, because what I've seen this before and heard this before about being saved, and I want to know more about it myself, and I'm hoping that the audience can gain something from that. So, Susan, I'm going to throw it over to you. How are you?
I'm great. You're really good at that.
Yeah, I'm trying my best to give a good intro to people who want to come up on this podcast and bullshit with me and talk about their lives. I met so many interesting people, through social media and just throughout every different facet of life. And a lot of people are interesting. They have good stories to tell. You and I have been friends for probably about 4 years now. And, we met through, obviously, like I meet most people, through health and fitness, and I've watched you transform and change your life around a little bit, what I believe is for the better. And I think you would agree with that. So what we're going to talk about here today, and I want you to kind of just roll with it. This is your episode, being saved by Christ, not jumping right into that right away. What I'd like to know, and for our listeners to know, is just kind of who were you before you got saved, and start wherever you want about yourself and where you, in hindsight, maybe where you think you were going wrong and what was going right. And I'll let you just kind of go ahead and speak for your own self there.
Awesome. Thank you. So obviously I don't want to, give you an entire history on my childhood from the day I was born all the way up, but I do have to hit some of those highlights from my childhood just to kind of get a background of family and what my religious worldview was growing up. Okay. So I would say that I had a really good, solid, happy childhood. A lot of people don't know about me that I grew up in downtown Detroit. I lived on this. I didn't live on the streets. I lived in an old family home that my dad grew up in Detroit proper, and it was already thoroughly dangerous at that point. So my family got us out of there, and I don't have a lot of memories of that. We ended up moving into a nice suburban area, but within this nice suburban area, I lived in a trailer park for the first 12 years of my life. And a lot of people don't know that. I actually grew up with a lot of shame that surrounded that. And I don't feel that shame anymore. So I'm freely, willing to talk about that. Anyway, I grew up, my mom was a Catholic, and she played as a teenager, she grew up Catholic. She played for the worship team in church, and she played the acoustic guitar, and she has a talent for singing. And she met my dad when they were teenagers, and I was a surprise pregnancy. She went in to her gynecologist to get on birth control, and her doctor said, "Too late, you're pregnant." So that was me. She married my dad, and he was not a Catholic. He grew up with a Christian background. I think he identified as Methodist. For any of your listeners who would deem themselves religious, that's kind of controversial for a Catholic to marry a non-Catholic, but it isn't so when you're culturally Catholic, if you don't really align with the religious dogma or doctrine of either religion. And so they They were more or less cultural Christians, obviously. I mean, she got pregnant out of wedlock. So what does that tell you?
Right.
So anyway, my parents were super young when they had me, and they were pretty poor, and I never was the wiser. I was really happy in my young childhood. My dad was the breadwinner. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I really don't remember much of that time because around the time I was in third grade, um, and this is all from my perspective, of course, this isn't, so this is from a childhood perspective at the time and now growing into an adult. When I was in third grade, my dad suffered a tremendous mental breakdown. And I do say tremendous because he never worked a day of his life again. He was haunted with what the then diagnosis was called manic depression, which is now called bipolar. And he was diagnosed schizoaffective. So what does that mean? It means that my dad, from the time that I was a very young child, would spend days upon days awake, not sleeping, in like a manic type phase, speaking very quickly and not making a whole lot of sense. And then he would vacillate into bouts of depression where he would, conversely sleep for days on end, and he would weep profusely throughout the day. And as a child, that's scary and it's confusing. And my mom, then went to work. So she became the breadwinner. She went to test for the post office and she became a mail carrier. And so I'm the oldest child in my family. I have a younger brother who's probably about your age, Mike, maybe a little bit younger than you. He was born in 1984. So he's a little younger than you, probably.
Right.
And I kind of became like this caretaker for my family at a young age. And I would, clean the house. I would cook the meals. And I did this all to compensate for my dad who was ill. And I just kind of fell into that role. Okay. So he spent a lot of time in my formative years in and out of mental institutions. They were around in those days. They have since largely closed. There's very few mental institutions. So, in today's world, psychiatric patients kind of float in and out of the hospital when they have medical issues. Otherwise, they largely are just in a large population. So you encounter them all day, and, a number of them live on the streets. And I have because of this situation, I have an extremely, extremely sensitive, soft heart for the mentally ill because I lived with one. And so my dad was very sweet and soft-spoken and quiet, but they would test a lot of medication on him. And I mean, a lot of psychiatric meds. And from one day to the next, he would be mean, or he'd be sad. You never knew which dad you were going to get. So who I knew as a father was gone, essentially.
Right. And how old, real quick, how old were you during the height of this, during the worst part of this? What age were you?
During what I would consider the worst part of this,
yes,
was when I was around age 13. So how old are we in third grade? 9, 10? I'm not sure.
my daughter's in third grade. She's going to be 9 this summer, so 8 or 9.
Okay. So by the time I was 12, I would consider it the absolute height of all this. And so let's drive the story forward. At that time, my dad was long-term in a mental institution, and my mom was working long hours to make ends meet for us. Now, by then, we had, quote unquote, moved up and became middle class, and we were in a brick ranch homes and with a basement that was finished. Like, it was, we were rich by my standards.
Right.
And so I was in middle school, and at the age of 13, when my dad was hospitalized long-term and my mom was working, I would consider that a giant trauma in my life. It is a giant trauma in my life. And so now we are both parents, and I have a 12-and-a-half-year-old son. So I'm especially in tune with all of this. He's in middle school now. And at the age of 13, I was I was molested on an ongoing basis for a year straight, every single day. And I was, I was an innocent child. I had no basis for or worldview about any of this. I was a protected child. I wasn't exposed to worldliness in that regard. So it was very blindsided for me. And I was in the formative years when my body began to start changing. And apparently, that became noticeable.
Where were you being abused? Where was do you want to share
I
that?
was,
If you don't want to, that's
I
okay.
will share it. And there's going to be some questions that you're going to specifically will ask me concerning this that I may not have answers for because the trauma was so significant. Apparently there's this something that takes over you being able to cope rationally with what you're enduring, and you largely block a lot out. And that
Sure.
is insane to me, but it is a reality for me at the same time.
It's a defense mechanism, I believe, that we probably just put
Wow.
on ourselves. Absolutely. And yeah, please don't share anything you're not
Oh,
comfortable with,
no.
or whether you
Okay.
remember or not, or haven't blocked it out.
Well,
More or less just saying where did this take her? How could it have been prevented? Do you even know if it was possible?
yes.
I guess we'll get into that. I'll let you go ahead.
Sure. Well, it happened in my school, and they were older. They were not peers, but they weren't adults either. They were older kids.
Okay.
That I considered, they were not my peer group. They were older. I did not know them. They were strangers to me. But it was the same group of males that, for whatever reason, focused on me and only me. And I was the subject of their molestation. I mention this because this was where I would consider where I veered off of a path where I remember when I was a younger kid, this super quick story, super quick. When I was a younger girl, and I still would consider that I had faith in God. I remember only one prayer as a child, one. And it was because around third or fourth grade, I stole the math book from my class with the intention of taking it home because I wanted to play school with my friends. That was what we did. And I took that math book home, and I remember being fraught with fear, like convicted, like actual conviction. I knew I had sinned. So we are all born with this knowing of God. Even in the unknown world, we can look up and we look all around us, and we have to know that there is a creator. God made us that way. It's in scripture, what we know. So as a we have a sense of morality that's built in also. So even without the Catholicism as the background, I knew I was convicted instantly. I did something wrong. God, please save me. I feel horrible about it. And I was so convicted over the sin that I never brought that math book out and actually did play with my friends, because it would have been evidence of my thievery,
Right.
So anyway, fast forward to again during the molestation and everything. It was a time where I was mortified. I thought it was my fault, because a lot of victims do think it's their fault, if not all of them. I never told my family. I attempted to tell my teacher one time in a very clumsy kind of way, thinking, that he would get it and he would save me. He had a wife that was very, very ill, and he was out for a significant part of the year. So I rarely saw him. He would have substitutes that would fluctuate in and out, and ignored everybody and just, kept their nose in their magazine or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I asked my teacher, kind of to, I don't know, I just kind of tried to reach out to him thinking he would read through the lines, and he didn't. And that was a failed opportunity for them. So
do you
at
feel
that
like
time,
that teacher just didn't take you seriously, or do you feel like you didn't word it clearly enough, maybe, to him to take it serious? Or do you remember?
I think that knowing now that we are adults, if a child came to me that appeared to be timid and mortified and absolutely beet red with embarrassment and on the verge of tears, then why would you not implore further? But that did not take place.
Right. I can see that. And I think too, nowadays, I think maybe teachers, I can't speak for teachers, obviously, but I think maybe they're more a little aware to that sort of thing at this point in life rather than back in the day.
Yes. Well, I mean, there was something coexisting going on at that time. So you and I talked about how you kind of disassociate from what's going on. And so you don't wake up one day and go, I'm going to do this to cope with this trauma. We're kids. We don't know how to articulate those thoughts. So, but for whatever reason, mine became self-inflicted starvation. Some kids today, cut, some, reach out and cry out for help in other areas. And for me, concentrating and focusing on what I could control, because what can you control at 13, 14 years old? You can control the food that goes in your body or not. So that's whatever reason, that's how things manifested. I would go days upon days without eating any food and felt a sense of control in that regard. And it became my escapism for literally, it was my identity. It became something that I quote unquote felt comfortable in so that I could escape everything else that was going around me in life. My dad was hospitalized. I was being molested. I had, it also afforded me as a side note, it wasn't, anything that was pre-plotted out, but as a side note, this illness that I suffered afforded me a great deal of time out of school because I was seeing so many physicians, and I would see cardiologists, I would see therapists, I would see nutritionists. My mom was terrified because I had starved myself down. I was fully grown at 5'6" at that time, and I starved myself I was like 78, 75 pounds. That's scary. That's Holocaust then, Mike.
Right.
So
right. And this is a idea too, just to interject really quick, of, when I do talk about fitness, health, and eating and everything like that, just how deep this can go, these sorts of things, of where this type of thing can lead to into adulthood. So just something to point out there is to, when you see somebody eating or not eating, to maybe not make so much light of it or jokes about it or anything like that, or any assumptions. So please continue.
Love that you said that, because this culture today tells you to, just look in your phone and ignore people, look down, nobody engages. And if you even lovingly mention anything to anyone, they can perceive it as hostile or non-loving. But when you come to the truth, and that's what I'm going to weave throughout our whole conversation here. When you come to someone with love and you share the truth with them, that is everything. So anyway, yeah, I was very ill. I had fur growing on my body. It's called lanugo. So it's your body's way of preserving body heat. So you start to grow fine hair on your body, and you start losing it from your head. I would start to lose masses of hair from my head. I would shower and feel like I was on the verge of passing out a lot of times. I would probably weigh myself 20, 30 times a day. It was a literal obsession. And it worked from diverting me from the other trauma that was going on. So it became a safe space, but that's an ill-equipped safe space, because had I known God, that's where I would have and should have turned. In that starting that time frame of my life and all moving on into adulthood, that was I would say the pivotal experience that became, we have two paths. We can harden our hearts, or we can soften them and turn to God. And my hard heart became harder, and it was calloused and became more and more calloused over the years. And so I was shutting God out. And God to me was not a personal relationship at that time and didn't become personal until I got saved. God was this elusive judge in the sky that didn't know or care about what was going on with me. And if anything, as a child, and now as an adult, I should say, looking back throughout my years as a child, I would have thought, he must hate me. I must have done something wrong to deserve this. And that is a lie from the pit of hell, because God knows each and every one of us that walk this earth. And he created you, and he wants you to know him and to enter into a relationship with him anyway, through Jesus Christ. So that all, that moved on. Eventually that whole molestation ended, and with it, my eating disorder took a little bit longer to dissipate. I clung to that for a long time. And even when I got, and I think you will understand a lot of this with your clientele, even when I got clinically better, like outside, if I looked physically healthy again, eventually, I regained my menstrual period again, eventually, and I no longer scared people when they looked at me. I didn't look like a skeleton anymore, but little did they know that I was broken inside.
Yeah, it's a tough, it's
Broken.
it's something that we can't really tell just by looking at a person. There's so much more to someone than their physical appearance and what they show us, what they say to us. The reality is within them, and you know that more than anybody else. So, please do continue.
Okay. So I would say, moving on towards starting in my early 20s, I guess we'll go into there. I still had patterns of quite, disordered eating. I would, and I mean very disordered eating. It was strict foods that I would and wouldn't eat, certain times that I would and wouldn't eat. I was very kind of OCD about that.
What would you say you were eating? Like, what would a day look like, if you could recall? Like, just a quick snapshot of it. Like, what would your day look like
at that time?
or at any point when you felt like you were at any point when you were disordered eating? What would you say that your meals looked like? Your daily intake was?
I would eat once a day. I would eat when I got home from work, once a day. So literally once every 24 hours I would eat. And that there would be running, and there would be biking in the midst of all that. It wouldn't matter how many hundreds of calories I had burned. I ate once a day. I would eat, I don't know, like I would truthfully at the time, because you have to go kind of what the culture was at the time too. They were already heavily pushing the non-meat alternatives. So, I mean, I will say that I was considered, I aligned with liberal views, like worldview, both in socioeconomics as well as like culturally. I aligned very liberal back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought the lie about, I wasn't scared about the world ending with climate change. It was not like that, but I wasn't throwing soup on paintings or anything.
Right.
But I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to do better for the earth, and I'm going to eat fake chicken and fake meat and fake this and all, and not having any idea. So, but I in my early 20s, and then quite honestly woven throughout until I got saved, I led a sexually promiscuous lifestyle, thinking that was liberating somehow, because that's what the culture taught then, and it teaches now, that you're a woman, you can do anything, you can buy a home on your own, and you can have a job, and you can sleep around, and you can feel like you're the master of your domain and master of the universe. It's all lies. Because nothing will fill us up apart from Christ. That's how we are made. We are made to worship, and we will all worship something, Mike. whether we are consider ourselves religious or irreligious, we all worship something. So not knowing him, I worship self, which most people do. We worship ourselves. And so it's all about me. What can people do for me? How can I get ahead? Thinking that I can stuff myself with all of this, and that's going to bring me fulfillment. Maybe this next thing will make me happy. And it's always a quest for happiness and fulfillment, and subsequently, only as the years roll on, feeling more and more empty. So my fixation with promiscuity really stemmed from looking for love and acceptance unconditionally. And that also can only come from the one who made us, and that is Jesus. And so, that's kind of how my 20s were. So I mentioned I got my own house. I felt very prideful about that I did this all by myself. Way to go, good me. I'm living the life, working all these hours and paying a mortgage, and I'm single, and sleeping with all these guys, and it's fleeting, the happy in working out. I mean, I ran my first marathon in my young 20s. And thinking, it was always this next thing will fill me up. If I just do this, then I'll feel happy. And it was never that. Right. Or if I lose this much more weight, if I get to be this weight, then it will all be better. Then I'll be happy, and people will be nicer to me, and they'll love me.
And I think that's kind of the route a lot of people end up taking in their lives. I know I have, and I'm pretty sure that the one of the biggest ways to reach actual depression is figuring out that these things that you believe are going to be fulfilling have this empty finish to it, and you just feel like you're at the end of a dead-end hallway every time you get there. So I going from where you were, from being sexually promiscuous, living on your own, being self-sufficient and feeling good about that, did that give you some satisfaction, but nothing that stuck? And then at that point, when did you decide that you think you wanted to pursue a family life and a husband and stuff?
Oh, yeah. So it's always going to give you initially a sense of satisfaction. And so I'm going to make a kind of a parallel here. I'm going to probably mention it here and then again down the road, but I've never tried drugs of any kind. I've never smoked a cigarette. I never even got into drinking heavily. I never tried any kind of drug, but I liken the enemy of this world, that is Satan, to a drug dealer, and the parallels are astounding, because my understanding is when you start taking drugs, it feels amazing, and you get such a high, and obviously over the progression of time as a drug abuser, you become more and more addicted, and you need more and more to achieve what you first felt as a high.
Right, exactly.
To feel so good. But
right.
So your elation, although you can achieve it as a drug user, you have to take more and more, and you have to become more and more depraved and lose more and more of who you are. And the what you get in return is less and less over time, but you're always chasing after it. Absolutely. It's the drug that gets you to lose who you are, and Satan does this in much the same way.
Exactly.
See, so when you asked me, do you feel a sense of fulfillment from these things? Yes, because that's what the devil wants you to do. He wants you doing anything to chase after anything, and I mean anything in this world apart from Christ.
Right. And
he is convinced the world he does not exist. Much of the world does not want to admit he exists.
Correct.
So he's much craftier and much more intelligent than any of us give him credit for. And certainly at that time, he was not in my mind, and nor was God in any capacity. I was dabbling, starting in, oh my goodness, in my 20s. I was dabbling in quote unquote spirituality, and what I now know and I've come to understand to be prohibited by God. It's in his word. I dabbled in the occult. There is no good there is no good way to dabble in the occult. It's all evil, even if it's presented as being good. I'm going to give you some examples, and this is probably going to trigger a lot of your audience.
Anything
It's
goes
going
here.
to.
Anything goes
Sure.
here. I don't really have many rules on
It's
this
fine.
thing, so go for it.
I will disclaimer to Mike's audience, everybody. He does not share my views necessarily, so I'm not speaking for him, and I will speak boldly and unashamed though. So Ouija boards, that's evil. It's demonic. You're speaking to demons. I did that. I had volumes of books on astrology that I would read on, and I would, insofar as I took it so seriously that I would only date people that were quote unquote compatible with me.
Are you talking anything in the realm of like your zodiac signs and
Yes.
things like that?
Oh, and much deeper, the whole like moon signs and your rising signs. And I would do I'd do birth charts, and I'd ask people what time and what day were you born and where, so I could look them up and chart them before I found them eligible or not.
That's a great. So that's some serious work, though, to find that compatible person for you. That's more work than most people are willing to do, at least.
I did attempt to do this whole like meditating / channeling stuff where you empty your mind, which is also demonic, by the way. Especially in my later 20s. We will talk more about that, but my dad died when I was 28. And interestingly enough, Mike, he died on February 8th of 2007, which is 16 years to the day of this recording today. Oh. And so he died at the age of 49. He was very, very young. He had battled, the mental illness for all those years that I had told you about from his early 20s. It all started with him thinking he had been spied on. Have you ever seen that movie, A Beautiful Mind, by the way, with Russell Crowe? Is that his name?
I believe
the Gladiator guy.
Yeah, he's the guy from Gladiator, but I have not seen that movie, so I will have to check that out.
Oh, I encourage you to see that movie because I see a lot of my dad in that character. My dad was brilliant. And he was plagued with mental illness. And when I could look at him and he would veer off and he would tilt his ear to the side, and I could tell he was hearing voices. And he was hallucinating and seeing things that were not there. He would hear things that were not there. It was very psychotic type stuff when he was not controlled by his medication. He was also he had chronic epilepsy, and his seizures seemed to get worse and worse. So
did they ever designate any reasons to how this came? Because he wasn't having this throughout his whole life. This is something that came on later in life for him, correct?
His first epileptic seizure happened when he was a young teenager, sometime between the age of 12 and 15. And his first psychotic break, the inkling of that was probably around the time he was 19 to 21. My mom, now again, they had gotten married when they were teenagers. So she had known him since she was 15, and they were only 1 grade apart. He was 1 year older. So when he started telling her, when he would come back from work and he would say, there's people taking pictures of me, there's people spying on me, she believed him. She had no reason to not believe him. It wasn't until things progressed further down the road and he ended up leaving that job where she came in to leave with him, and she saw, what she later told me was that she saw looks of pity on everyone's faces because they knew my dad was so ill. So yeah, he full on thought he was getting spied on. So please watch A Beautiful Mind, and that is a pretty good depiction of my dad. Although he wasn't a professor, he was brilliant. Sure. He wanted to be a writer for a living. So he was an avid writer and artist, and he was very creative in that way. In 2007, at the age of 49, he died. He had a massive epileptic seizure, and it killed him. He hit his head, and he went into the hospital and he was already dead on arrival. And by the time I made it to the hospital that morning, they let me into the morgue to see him laying on a gurney, and I saw his face covered in dried blood. And so that was something else. It was at that time, that I think a lot of people that do not know Christ will sort of understand where I'm coming from when I tell you that when you don't know to cry out to God, and he's so, you think he's so far from you. And it was, if I'd thought of 100 things in a day, God was never even in that 100. That's how far I was from having a relationship with Jesus my entire life. And so I turned to what more deeper occultism that I didn't understand was sin. I didn't understand that I was inviting demonic entities. So I got really big into, well, now my dad's dead and I want to know if he's okay, wherever he is. And so I began seeing mediums and psychics. I thought it was innocent. I did not know any better. And then, I met my husband that same year that my father died. And I had convinced myself in my mind that my father sent him to me, that he was sent by my dad, not my heavenly father. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we don't communicate with our loved ones when they pass. I need you to know that. So direct conversation with them. And so people will say, well, Susan, you're crazy because I've had this spiritual sign, or I've smelled my mom's like perfume, or I heard a song that came on the radio that she sent me. These are examples that a lot of people said and that mm-hmm. I would have been in that category too, by the way. Mm-hmm. But demons are thousands of years old. They are much more intelligent than you or I. They have figured this game out about how to fool us. We are not nearly as smart as we think we are. And so they are known as familiar spirits, which are demons. They follow you throughout your life and they impersonate your family. And they know how to do it because they followed you your whole life. So when I would see mediums and I would get little nuggets of information about what was supposedly coming from my dad, I now know that those are demons that have followed my family. And you can all think I'm crazy. That's fine. And until and unless you know Christ, then you will know that what I'm speaking is truth.
Not at all. It's very intriguing, to be honest with you. No crazy thoughts on my end here. So please continue.
So I meet my husband in the same year, and we have a whirlwind romance, and we ended up getting married in 2009 after meeting in September of 2007. I have been fairly more public, obviously, since coming to Christ, about coming clean with a lot of my life sins. And I, as you know, and I have mentioned that I, on Instagram, that I had an abortion. I got pregnant with my husband when we were dating. Mm-hmm. And I hold no ill will with my husband. I take full responsibility for having this abortion and going through with it. My initial instinct, my gut reaction was surprise and happiness. I wanted to have that baby. And we were in a great place. We just weren't married. It was, and God sets parameters, Mike, for a reason. And I didn't know that then, but there's a reason why it's supposed to be one man and one woman for life. And you wait to have sex until you're married so that these kind of disastrous things don't happen. Mm-hmm. So he did not want us to keep the baby. I hold no ill will against him for this. I did for years, though. I was resentful about a lot of things, but since coming to God, it's like the cloak of weight that just fell off of me, and I don't hold any grudges or unforgiveness to anyone. And so I went forward with the abortion and instantly regretted it. I can tell you every bit, okay. So we all talk about it today. Like for those of us who remember 9/11, we all know where we were. We all tell the story. We all talk about it with each other. Where were you on 9/11? And we all have very detailed memories, right? I mean, sometimes we can remember what we were wearing or what we were watching on TV or so any kind of traumatic events like that, we tend to keep in our memory. And so that's how my abortion was. I can remember everything about it that day. I instantly regretted it. Over the years, it would pop up in my head and I would push it. I would push it far down, kind of brushing it under the rug all the time. And I would try to convince myself, which I'm not even sure the thoughts that I had were my own. Sometimes I wonder, because the enemy can get in your head, not Satan himself, but like the fallen angels, they can get in your head and feed you certain thoughts, which is why a lot of people come to commit suicide, by the way. I don't think those are their thoughts.
Correct.
So when people say they're wrestling with demons, that's not a figure of speech. That's
right.
a reality.
And I've also said to myself that I think the people that do commit suicide, they're not truly killing themselves. What they're trying to do is shoot or drown out a feeling or a demon, a pain within them, that the only way that they can alleviate that is through death, apparently. And that's a sad way to have to think, because I do believe there's help for them. But please go on.
Yeah, I've had 2 cousins that have committed suicide.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Intentionally. And so yeah, I would push these thoughts of my absolute heartbrokenness of what I had done, and I'm going to call it what it is, and killing my baby, because that is a baby, and that is a life that God meant to come forward that I extinguished. And but I bought the lies of this world. I own my sin, but I absolutely bought the lies of this world. I went to a Planned Parenthood, which incidentally, I want to make this known. I had been getting my OBGYN care at Planned Parenthood for years. And so to me, I didn't know. I thought they were just a doctor for women's health. I thought this is where I go to get my yearly pap smear. I know this is not like stimulating conversation for you as a dude, but I would go get my yearly pap smear. I would go keep up on my birth control so I didn't get pregnant. And that was what I thought Planned Parenthood was. And so it wasn't until I got pregnant to terminate that child that I even learned that Planned Parenthood did those things. And when I went in to have a consultation with them, they are a business. They're there to make money. They're not there to guide you into the right decision. They tell you, yes, you should get an abortion, and this is how much it costs, and we can have it done and out of the way, and you can move on to your life, and blah, blah, blah. They don't tell you there's alternatives. There's trauma pregnancy care centers that will take you in and help support you and give you resources and an abundance of assistance so that you don't have to make this decision. Because a lot of women, and I've done some classes. I did a 12-week class after I got saved, specifically on abortion and like dealing with the sin of abortion in your past and everything. And it says that a multitude of women that have an abortion will become extremely sexually promiscuous. Okay. And they will get hypersexualized. And that's a statistic, but I find it interesting because I definitely fit that mold.
Did they say what reasosoning that is? Why that becomes that? Is that just a way of coping with that sort of difficult type of loss and that guilt?
It's a worldly form of coping when you don't have a biblical worldview and you're looking to stuff. Again, it goes back to stuffing yourself with things that you think you're going to find fulfillment with, and you inevitably can't. So
ironic how the thing that led to the abortion is the vice that they turn to.
Yes, sir. Very, very good point made. That should be a good soundbite for your podcast here.
And we'll crop that. Very good. and I should ask, did this instance at all, were you already a delivery nurse when you did this, or did this lead to that in any way?
Nope. And I love that you mentioned that. And there's something else I want to mention a little bit. Really, sure. I want to tie it up. So this is when things kind of speed up now. So I statistically, almost all women that go through this don't stay with their partner, or their partner doesn't stay with them, but the relationship dissipates. That did not happen. We actually went on to buy a house together, and we got married. We got engaged and married. We got engaged, and we got married 2 months after we got engaged, because we just couldn't not be together. So that, I believe that God was sovereign in all of that, because statistically we should not have stayed together. But our relationship got to be amazing. We got married. That's when I went to nursing school. I went back to school a week after we got back we went on our honeymoon. And I started up back at college again that week. So as soon as I got back from the honeymoon, I started at college. I went to 2 colleges simultaneously so I could get as many classes as I could in, so I could hurry up and be a nurse, because I had decided that's what I wanted to do. I had been in sales for 8 years. I was an insurance agent. I was licensed. It was giving me absolutely nothing. It was not feeding me in any kind of way that I felt that I wanted to continue with. So I thought nursing is going to be the answer. And, in my mind frame at that time, I thought my dad will be proud. My dad will be proud. He's looking down on me. That's not really the case. Anyone who's in heaven, who has accepted Christ, they're in there living their best life. They're not watching what we're doing down here.
Right.
So, and I'm sorry to tell you that, because that's going to make a lot of people mad to hear that. But that's what I thought. So I went back to school. Yes, I became a registered nurse. I worked really, 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 really hard to not fail, because that was the time the economy was in a shamble. Like the giant housing bubble happened. Everyone was unemployed. It was really, really bad. Interest rates sucked. And so anyway, I was determined, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for my family. And there was no option for failure. And so I did succeed. I got pretty much straight A's. We had, during that time when I was in nursing school, we had our son in 2010. And so when I was in nursing school, because I was on a wait list for a while, that's how it was at that time. You had to be on a wait list for like a year or two. So I took a ton of classes in that time to get all the core stuff out, and the co-requisites and everything. And so when I went to nursing school, Christian, our son, was a year old. And, again, failure was not an option. And I was very pride-filled. Looking back, I have a very different perspective on my life now as a believer than I did at the time. So looking back, I will say that I strove on perfection. It was something I had rested easy and comfortable with from my childhood. We talked about, what had happened to me in school. And ironically, I was, excelling in school during all that. And, the whole weight thing is a very, my understanding is a lot of people that suffer from anorexia become very in this bubble of needing to achieve perfection. So that I kind of rested back into those ways, as far as like needing to excel in school and be the best, be perfect, get the best grades, win out in front of everyone and stand out and be the one that everyone looked to as, she's the best one here. I feel horrible saying that now, but that's literally how it was. I thought, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the best at it. And I'm going to take all the glory and credit for myself.
With a sense of a little pride there, maybe, you think?
Huge pride, very, very pride filled. So yeah, okay. I became a nurse. I was a med surg nurse. During nursing school, towards the end of my nursing school, like my last semester, we got pregnant, and I made it to 16 weeks, and we miscarried. So I had to deliver our baby in the hospital, and I was in absolute disbelief. I didn't want to fail at school. I didn't want to lose my baby. I felt no control. And I was someone who prided myself on control. Like that was the thing. I always had to have control. And I cried out in agony delivering our baby, and still did not turn to God. My heart was getting harder than ever. And even in pain, that's pivotal. In times of pain, you can have a tender heart, or you can have a hard heart. One of the two will happen. So I became a nurse a few months later, and was pregnant again, and also carried to 16 weeks and delivered that baby in the hospital. And then I would never take that baby home either. It was becoming evident that I could not carry a pregnancy anymore. And, if there were such a thing as miracles, then it was our living son. I went on to have several pregnancies after that, and never held on to any of them. So we don't have any more children. Was never able to I conceived a lot. I just couldn't hold them. So I was a med surg nurse for 10 months. And then I had this thing happen within me. This is interesting. I was like, I'm going to go be a labor and delivery nurse. And this is really important that I mention this. And I want you to grasp this. I think you will, because you're so super smart. In my not having a relationship with God, and not having any my worldview is very warped. So I'm thinking, I'm going to make right. And this is all subconscious thoughts. This isn't anything that I'm consciously thinking of at the time, but my way of making right with an abortion, of consenting to have my baby killed in 2008. And now I'm a labor and delivery nurse. So I'm gonna right what I have done wrong. Okay, this is in my eyes. I'm going to right what I have done wrong. I have lost babies. I want to be there and be compassionate for other women who go on to lose babies. And I want to be responsible for being there when women are bringing life into the world. So it's kind of it's like a Band-Aid on a world system that leads to no salvation, by the way, but is eternal salvation. But it's kind of a man-made way of fixing things in life. If I'm going to go do good now to make up for the bad I did, and that can't happen. Mm-hmm. And so I became a labor and delivery nurse, and I have been in the same position ever since then. I started in January of 2015, and I just celebrated my 8th year there last month. And I became very, very sad and depressed as a result of everything, because I was surrounded by women giving birth. I was surrounded by drug addicts popping out babies like Skittles. Are you with me?
I'm here.
And I became, instead of immensely compassionate, I was becoming more hardened. I was getting angry and angrier, because we kept pursuing having, growing our family during this time. I'm in my mid 30s by then. And it's not happening. Okay. It's not happening. I went on fertility medications. We started spending so much money on fertility doctors and
probably growing a bit resentful, maybe
overall. So resentful.
It was like seeing the drug addicts maybe not appreciating the life they're giving to this world. And when you've tried so hard and been through so much, I can see that becoming a very frustrating environment for you. So
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, it was. And I don't feel now, in today as a saved individual, I don't feel the same way anymore towards any human being anymore. But these were real realities for me at that time. Yes, I was so resentful. In my worldview, I thought, I'm better than that person though, but I'm better than them. And the reality is that we are all sinners. We are all broken, all of us. And even though we have trauma in our lives, and who doesn't have trials in our lives, it is not meant to separate us from God. It's to make us cry out to him. And we live in a fallen world. Even unbelievers understand and have at least acknowledged that they've heard of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. But do you really understand it until you're saved? I don't think so. They were, Eve was told, and so was Adam, do not eat of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or else you will surely die. And so she was deceived by the enemy, which is Satan, and did not listen to God. And the original sin that Satan told Eve, he said, because when she refuted him and said, well, God said we're not supposed to eat that, and Satan says, did God say that? So it's already creating doubt in the mind. Did God say that? Ye will surely not die, but God knows that you will have knowledge and be like God if you do. So in our, the pride is kind of the original sin anyway. It's what it cast the devil out of heaven, because he thought he could be better than God.
Satan's the original gaslighter. That's what he is. That's what
and he weaves his wiles all these thousands of years later, and we fall for it generation after generation. So, but when you don't know him, you don't know you're falling for it. And this is another sensitive thing to say, but because of the fall, and they were cast out of the garden. We're all from Adam and Eve, so we are all born with a sin nature. So the first time you ever sinned in your life, it didn't make you a sinner. We actually sin because we are sinners. I just want to point that out. We are all destined for hell. We are all separated from fellowship with God because of our fallen nature. And he sent and prophesied about this rescuer that was going to come to save humanity. And that is Jesus. So God is Jesus. He came in the flesh. He died for our sins, for those who will believe that he died on the cross, and that he rose from the dead. And all we have to do is cry out to him and say, I know that you died. I know you died for me. You died in my place. You died the death that you and I deserve, Mike. Okay. And he who knew no sin became sin on our behalf. And when we accept him and we say, Jesus, you are Lord, I know you died on the cross. I know you rose again. I believe this in my heart. And he gives you and he grants you this gift of repentance. So he shows you, for everyone, it's a little bit different, but not really that different. He shows you kind of all of your sins, and it amasses in such a way at a culmination that is, you finally realize, I have sinned against a holy God, and he gave me a lifeline, and that is Jesus. So we are saved by grace. There's nothing we can do to achieve our way to him, because all of our good works, kind of like me going to be a labor and delivery nurse to fix, quote unquote, cancel out my sin abortion, that is filthy rags. Those good deeds bring me nothing to get closer to God on my own. We have no righteousness on our own. The righteousness lies all in Jesus, and he imputes that righteousness to those who believe on him, and he gives us everlasting life. So I did not know any of that then. I didn't understand the gospel then. And dare I say, to shake things up a little bit more, I don't even know that I heard the gospel then. And you say, well, how can that be? You grew up as a Catholic. We didn't know these things. We were never encouraged to read our Bibles. I don't know that I ever heard the gospel when I was a child. And I went to catechism. I got my first communion. I had my confession, all the blah, 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 all the checklist of stuff. but I did not know God. That was an external religiosity that brought me no peace, by the way. And it did not bring me into a relationship of saving faith.
So let me ask this. I grew up, as you know, throughout in Catholic schools my entire life. And we were required to attend church on Fridays and everything of the sort. And, a lot of the stuff can fall on deaf ears. So what do you think from when you were, brought up in that religious and that Catholic upbringing? What was missed by your upbringing that you didn't hear the gospel? Was it just not presented to you in a way that you could comprehend it at that age? Or what do you say that could be improved upon, how people can see this, what you've seen earlier in life and understand it more?
Excellent question. I wish I could articulate in a way. I wish I could articulate an answer that was as beautiful as the question you just posed to me.
Sure.
But I can't, because I don't. If I heard the gospel, I couldn't have told you. Did it go in one ear and out the other, or did I hear it at all? I truly don't know, looking back, because when I did hear it, when I got saved in 2020, which is the moment I can't wait to tell you about coming up. But it was the good news being presented to me. And to me, it was like something, this is glorious. I've never heard this. I didn't know this. So one has to also be ready to receive this news. Their heart has to be prepared. And God is the one to do the preparing. We don't come to salvation on our own. He prepares us for that moment. That's just, he's sovereign in all of it. He
Right.
has control over all of it. So
as you move forward, though, I wanted to know. So as you move forward now, we're around 2015, 2016-ish here, and you're doing your thing as a delivery nurse. Maybe you're not feeling the fulfillment right now. So to fast forward a little bit, getting closer to that 2020, a pivotal year in for everybody, I believe. But what had happened then as you progressed with your marriage, through everything else, that kind of through the state of the world and everything that kind of came after 2015, because there was a shift in the world, in my opinion. I felt it right around 2014, something around that time. I started seeing things change and people acting differently, mostly through social media and the internet. I believe I think it was just a gradual increase of how we communicate and how we get our opinions out there. I think that's what really drove it, starting in 2011 and working its way up. So around this time now, where you had, you're about 3 years removed from being saved. What did the next 3 years look like leading up to this?
Okay, so we're getting close to the time when I meet you, close to it.
Yes.
I am in what I don't understand at the time to be a bout of massive depression, because I'm feeling like a failure as a human being. Especially, I'm feeling like a failure as a woman, as a wife. I can't make babies, and here I am doing it for a living. I'm not making babies for a living, but I'm bringing forth life along with women in a supportive nature, and I can seemingly control all things. Haha. So I think, but I can't control this, and it's driving me crazy. And I'm severely depressed. That's my cat.
Oh, we had a cat feline interference. That's okay.
Anyway,
We welcome anybody on the show. Like I say in the intro, anything is welcome, even your pets. So
he didn't break anything. Oh my goodness. Okay, so but I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. The cat needs to be fed, most likely. Usually that's how they are. If they don't get the attention that they want, they demand that. But no, go on. You said you're moving along.
So no sense of control.
No sense of control, right?
Super depressed. So I, okay, so I'm grieving, right? I'm grieving from losing my babies, that I've never dealt with it, by the way. I shoved it under the rug, like I shoved everything under the rug, everything that I didn't want to deal with throughout all those years. So I had a lot of crap under this proverbial rug, okay? And because I don't want to deal with it, I'm just going to keep my head up, and I'm going to keep moving forward, forging forward, and keep control. and have that veneer that I have everything under control. So I am, in reality, I'm deeply depressed. I am grieving, but I can't grieve in the right way. I'm grieving my losses, not having any understanding about my husband's own grieving. So we are, at this point, moving further apart. And I am gaining a substantial amount of weight in this time. So I, went from a normal body weight. It was like, I don't know, 130 pounds, and I ballooned to 260 pounds in a relatively short period of time. I want to say, I don't even know, probably within like 3 years or something. I'm not really sure how long, but I come to this point in 2017 when the shift happens and I start to regain control again. And as far as like consuming, food that's proper for me again, and not living this life of lethargy and depression anymore. So I start fueling my body with healthy foods. I start working out. And this is in 2017. And within, this is September of 2017, by January, even just a few months later, that cloud had started lifting from my head, and I was thinking more clearly because I was eating, great nutrition, and I was moving with great intention, and the weight was falling off like very fast. Mm-hmm. And it would continue to for like the next 15 months. In 15 months, I lost 130 pounds. And I was not in the beginning, but I became very prideful about that also. It's possible to be simultaneously very prideful in your quote unquote accomplishments while also feeling a sense of emptiness and needing acceptance, all in one package, by the way. Mm-hmm. So within a few months, I was on this website called MyFitnessPal, and I was logging my food. Okay. I wasn't a macro tracker or anything like that, but I was logging my food. I was logging my fitness. I liked the structure that it afforded because I'm like a checklist kind of girl. So it kind of gave me that sense of that. And then I came to realize that there was like a community within this website. And I regret that happened because it was the catalyst for a lot of horrible things that were about to happen that I had no idea were coming. So there was a community. You're talking with quote unquote like-minded people that are seeking the same endeavors, men and women alike. It's social, it's anonymity, and you're starting to get attention, and it's attention that you have no business being involved with as a married person. Mm-hmm. And I felt special, and I was not feeling that way in my marriage. I felt ignored and unloved. And here was someone making me feel good. And I will say that I remember, so that I pushed that away initially. That is what people may say your conscience. People say that's your conscience telling you this, or it's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is witnessing to you saying, back off, don't do this. This is sinful. You can't, this won't lead you into anything good. Didn't know that. But I do remember a time where I gave pause and I said, this feels wrong. This is, I know this to be wrong. But we love initially as humans, what sin does for us. Initially, it feels really good. But like the drug addict thing, the analogy we talked about earlier, the devil will always come knocking for payback for what's his, Mike. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he is happy. And I do mean this. He is happy to give you what you want initially, to get you addicted and to give you what you want. I remember doing visualization practices and manifestations about how I was going to achieve the body that I ultimately did achieve. And ultimately it led into, me being self-obsessed, a lover of self, while also simultaneously desperate for love that I felt I was not getting at home. And I did not have a relationship with God, which is the only love that can ever fulfill me. So I'm seeking it from external sources. So I full on embark in an affair. it destroys my marriage almost. But for God and his sovereignty, he saved my marriage even before I wanted to be saved. I was prepared to leave my husband. We sold our home. I got an apartment all by myself because I'm ready to move on and be this single woman and live this single life. And, meanwhile, we have a son, and it's like I'm living for myself and not even for my marriage or my child. It's horrible. My husband fought for me, and we stayed together. And I'm so grateful to God for doing that, because I believe that God had a part. He had every part in doing that, and knowing that we were going to be his. He was saving us from what the devil seeks to destroy. He wants to destroy families. He wants to destroy marriages and the family, because it's the smallest unit of governance. You and I have talked about that.
Right.
It's the smallest, unit of governance, and it's what keeps societies together is nuclear families, mom, dad, children. That's how it's meant to be. And it's not mom and mom. It's not dad and dad. It sure isn't two moms and a dad. And it's not all this poly, whatever, amorous and all that junk. Anyway, so our marriage is saved. It's beautiful. We sell our house because we had put it up for sale, and we ended up getting a new one. And I'm still in the bouts of my fitness and everything. And it's kind of become my new identity. It's the hat that I'm now wearing, as I've wore different hats throughout my life. And I'm feeling like I got this, I'm under control. But again, the devil always antes up and wants what's due to him. And it became very, when I looked great on the outside, and I could give you a smile, and I would appear to be someone in control. But I was someone who was living a double life, a secret life. It got so bad where I would be crying in the locker room. I would be crying in my shower all the time. I would self-destruct in these ways. And I was looking for unwanted attention from anyone who would give it to me. I would even be at the gym with my husband, and I would flirt with men even when he was around and he didn't know it. That's how callous my heart had become, and how little I cared about myself and my marriage. And I sinned against my husband and sinned against God in this way. And I will always regret that, but I know that I am now forgiven, because there is always forgiveness for us. There is no way you can be too far gone for Jesus to save you. So in 2020, so this is the thing, January 2020 hits. Okay. And, we're kind of finding a new leaf. I figure, not knowing why I'm doing what I'm doing at that moment, I can now tell you why, looking back. I proposed to my husband that we embark on things I've heard about, kind of like whispers over the years, something that I had always shunned and thought was disgusting, now all of a sudden seemed tantalizing and fun for me. And I had, again, where did that come from? Because these were things I previously thought were taboo and disgusting, and now they sounded fun. And so I suggested that we embark on the life of swinging and becoming, getting into the lifestyle, I guess it's known as. And I proposed this to him. It was me. I'm like, for anyone who is religious, listens to this, I was the Jezebel. I'm like the woman going out and seeing what men I can get to sin, and I'm leading them into that sin. And that's so bad.
And how was his initial response to that when you brought that to his attention?
I don't remember the initial. I only remember what came to be was that he agreed. This is so whack. I will tell you that, like, a couple months before that, I actually flirted with the idea of joining a church. Now, mind you, I was not looking for God, but I was looking for something. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that I did this. I embarked on like looking to join a church. I was going to get my family to go to church. Again, was not doing it to look for God. I had no care about God. He was not in my head, but I was thinking this will be something good to do. This will get my son, into some good structure, or with good morals, ha ha ha. Right. Or, this will bring fellowship to me, because I was looking for something. I didn't know what, Mike. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, I never did attend any of those churches because while you mentioned about the shift in the world, I was seeing it. I was starting to become very financially, like fiscally conservative. I was aligning myself more with conservatism, which I was never that way before. However, socially, I was still very much liberal. I was, there's nothing wrong with being gay. There's nothing wrong with being a homosexual and getting married. There's nothing wrong with any of that, I thought. And I wanted to cling to it being acceptable that abortion was okay too. I wanted to cling that was healthcare, and that way I could compensate and not own it as a sin. But I didn't know God, so I didn't know any of this. So I ultimately did not end up going to a church, because I looked at a couple other online statements, and because they didn't affirm gay marriage, I was like, screw this. They don't align with my beliefs, so I'm not going to go. That's how messed up it is. God is God. He made us all, so he gets a right to dictate what is right and what is wrong. He is the definition of a moral absolute, Mike. Okay, and so he gets to dictate that, and not us the other way around. We conform to him, not the other way around. So because that fizzled really quickly, yet I was still looking for something and looking for fellowship. What could have been church membership became, let's go be swingers. So because I want friends. And then, you know what? We'll have friends that we can go on vacations with, and we'll have friends that like to go to the gym and go hiking like we do. That was my thinking. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really even about sex. It was about kind of like, oh, we can own this title, and it's still taboo, but that's not why we're doing it. Right. But then things change, and you go to dinners with people, and you start having that ego and pride stroked in massive ways. It's so bad though. Because you become like, well, at least for us, like, because we were so new to the lifestyle, so you become like the shiny new toy to these people. Okay. Because you haven't been in the lifestyle. You're brand new. You're kind of like the virgins, right?
Oh yeah. They get that indoctrination. They get that indoctrination feel like, going a little bit.
Yeah. You're the untouched newbies. You're not defiled yet. You're not defiled.
You're a reborn virgin in their eyes.
Oh my goodness. And like, and then you get all these affirmations like thrown at you. And all of a sudden, because you're living in this like secret underground world, quite literally, you start all of a sudden rubbing elbows with people that don't really talk to you out in the real world. Like people in high finance, they're surgeons. There's a lot of doctors and nurses and some cops, by the way. Mm-hmm. So I never met anyone that I knew in it, but I definitely met people that knew people that I knew. Right. If that makes any sense. It was really close for comfort. And so anyway, you're rubbing elbows with the quote unquote sort of upper echelon, more elite of people. And that's sick way to look at it, that you would even care, that I would even care rather. I mean, but, and let alone they're talking to you, let alone they're giving you affirmations, and they want you. And it's so backwards. It's so super messed up. And you see things that, you have become desensitized. We have all become desensitized over our lifetime especially to like, TV and movies, and they indoctrinate us. You talk about indoctrination.
Oh yeah.
To where you're basically watching full-fledged porn, if not full-fledged porn. And then it's before too long, it doesn't feed you like it once did. It doesn't rile you up. It doesn't get you excited or whatever.
No, and the access to the phones is triple, quadrupling every little dopamine hit that we look for, and we have it at our fingertips, and it's just slowly desensitizing every little thing that we do that you just don't even find enjoyment from it anyways, even if it's a toxic form.
Correct. Which is why this would be I would love to do another podcast with you sometime, because pornography essentially leads to because you have to constantly ante up to get that high, to achieve that high that you initially get. They say that is one of the leading things that leads to child sex trafficking and child sexual abuse, because these people get depravity doesn't happen all at once. Okay. It happens in slow increments until you have no filter anymore. Like nothing phases you. You are so desensitized to where, some of these child-like predators, they're unabashed about it. They're like, no, this is good. This is a good thing. And it's so whack. So that's kind of how it became with, immersing into the lifestyle a little bit, but it was always this. So, my husband was amenable to this. We had like a website, like a profile and everything. And it was kind of like a match.com for married people that want to get naked with each other.
Right.
And, so we went, January of 2020, literally the first week of January 2020, we go out to dinner with these people, and then we go to a hotel takeover. And if anybody has any idea what that is, I'd be shocked. So I'll tell you what it is. It is a hotel that it closes all the windows. It like blocks out all the windows, and it does not book any outside guests unless you are in this like swingers party for that engagement. So it is literally like a closed party. It's a hotel takeover, and you go and you converse with people, and it escalates over time to where people are more comfortable with each other. So it becomes, mingling and dancing, to now you are all welcome, and you're welcome to go to the orgy room or whatever they call it. You have to keep your phone behind. You are not allowed to bring that telephone in, because secrecy is a must. So I've seen so many things. I remember watching like a group orgy happen and going in for a closer look. So I'm literally like going through the crowd to get as close as I can to watch. And my husband grabs my arm and pulls me back. And I think he thinks I was going in to like participate, and that was never my intention. Mm-hmm. But, I think that's what he thought. And so it ensued in a giant fight, and we ended up going up to our room and slept the night. So we did not end up seeing or let alone participating in anything that night. And I'm grateful for that fight, let me tell you. Because I don't know where my depravity would have led me, and where the enemy would have locked hands with me and led me to go into further depravity. I haven't thrown on any scriptures yet, but I do want to mention one at least, because it's one that I think about a lot now. In the Old Testament, Jeremiah 17:9, the human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? But I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. So if we all think that we're better than our neighbor, we need to check ourselves, because I'm not any better than those drug addicts who were having babies in my hospital. And I'm not any better than the man who's on death row, by the way, in prison. There's a lot of prison ministries of people that come to saving faith. There's going to be a lot of people that are in prison that will go to heaven and live eternal life and glory with Jesus. And there's going to be a lot of soccer moms who love to listen to Harry Styles and Taylor Swift and deny the deity of Jesus and will reject him until their dying breath and will live in eternity in hell apart from Christ. And so we have to humble ourselves. God tells us to humble ourselves. 2020 is the humbling year for me, of all humbling years, where I was so pride filled. Everything fell like a ton of bricks. So we never did embark on any extracurricular activities with any couples, even though we did the fellowship thing because I was interested in going out to dinner with people. But when it came down to it, I always was like, can I envision another woman with my husband? And it became sickening to me to think about that. And I had, we had been estranged, emotionally estranged from some years. So for me to come to this point where I was like, no, I can't share him. That's my husband. That was a big deal, because I was largely not feeling that way for years, if that makes any. There was a lot of emotional detachment.
Sure. And it sounds like a breakthrough. It sounds like a bit of a breakthrough moment for you.
So it was such a breakthrough that the voice that I had heard initially in like January of 2018 that said, don't do this. And then I pushed that voice to the side and decided to embark on affair. I hadn't heard that voice again until 2020. And I heard the voice saying, don't do this. And I heard it a lot, Mike, don't do this. And I would even convince myself when the lifestyle thing was still something we were flirting with. I would tell myself, just do it, just get it over with, just do it. You'll be fine and just get past it. But the voice persisted louder this time. And it was, don't do this. And then guess what happened? Then Susan had tummy tuck surgery in March of 2020, March 10th to be specific. And what happened 3 days later, Mike?
We were shut down.
The world shut down.
The world's most deadly virus came out of Wuhan, China, from a little boy who decided to rip the head off of a bat and suck the blood down and then go kiss everybody in Wuhan. That's, I think, the story.
And it comes from where? It comes from China.
China.
So, yeah, March 10th, I'm having my tummy tuck surgery. March 13th, actually, I go back into the hospital because I'm having severe complications from my surgery. So I was actually inpatient in the hospital on March 13th when it was all over the news and people were starting to have meltdowns and I was watching it. Okay. Mm-hmm. It was kind of funny too, because I started having this like horrible barking cough. Which I don't think had anything to do with COVID, but I think they all did because the world was so scared. So virtually no one even came in my room to take care of me. I was coughing my head off, which hurt my incision really, really, really bad. So anyway, that obviously caused closures, right? So the gyms are closed. So now I'm like, okay, well, now I have to recover from surgery anyway. So I'm kind of really glad the whole world can't work out either because if I got to stay home and be on rest, then y'all got to. I don't mind that you all have to too.
You're all unhealthy and miserable right along with me, right?
Yeah, I was like, good. Misery loves company.
Yep.
So, then I was getting stir crazy, and what the devil vastly underestimated in 2020, because I've talked to a lot of people that got saved in 2020. I am certainly not the only one by far. But 2020 caused a slowdown for the world, right? So I'm home, I'm in recovery, I'm not at work, I'm not going to the gym, I'm not doing anything. And then when I did get better, I still couldn't work out. I was going, and obviously the gym wasn't open anyway, but I was, what do they call? I was essential, right? I was essential. So I had to go to work and, well, everyone got paid to stay at home. I was a little bitter about that in the beginning. So I was going to work and I was hearing, pandemonium, I guess is nothing short of pandemonium, fear in everyone, including me, by the way. I initially bought into the fear. I remember you asking me, you and I talked.
Yeah.
You were like, what do you think about this thing? Because you knew I was on the inside, right? Like I was seeing stuff. And it was initially scary because they were opening up lots of units and making them COVID units, and people were going on vents left and right. So initially I was scared because I was afraid of getting COVID. I was afraid of dying. And we all have a fear of death, by the way. All you can say you don't, but we all push that down and we subdue that fear of death until we can deal with it, hopefully one day before it's too late. And if we don't know Christ as our Lord and Savior, then we ride a fence. Okay. And so we're either in unbelief or we're riding a fence. So you can't ride the fence and think that, how do I say it? If you're a fence rider, then it's a no decision is a decision. Indecision to come to Jesus is a decision. You might as well be an atheist or an unbeliever because the end place is all the same. It's hell. And so the slowness of the world juxtaposed with, me having a fast-paced life, as a labor and delivery nurse in COVID was really different. But I was in labor and delivery, so we're a little bit apart from that, right? We did have some COVID patients, and we began to have more and more of them. But guess what? Nobody was really sick. A lot of them didn't even know they had COVID. We were just testing everybody. And I started researching a lot. So 2020, with the slowdown, because I couldn't work out and I was not so self-involved anymore, I had all this time on my hands. So I'm like, let's get to the bottom of what's really going on. Let's find what truth is. And it began with the COVID narrative. That was the start of it. That's how God used COVID for me and getting me to initially, become looking for truth, to get me thirsty for truth. So it became the COVID narrative and it kind of collapsing. But I was living in this bubble because a lot of people that I had previously worked with for years, like physicians, were very much on board with the narrative. They were drinking the Kool-Aid like nobody's business. And I'm like feeling alone. I'm feeling alone aside from my community of friends on Instagram. And that included you and a bunch of other people. And so the narrative collapsed. I realized COVID was not what the world was saying, that news is in fact lying to me. I didn't know that before then. Did you know that? I did not know. I actually thought they're telling me the news. This is the news.
I was a little already onto it. I had gone down some rabbit holes myself. I as far as lies go, I was probably in the sense of, and it still is, and it's obvious that it's bias depending on who you're looking at and listening to. Everyone's got their agenda, and if you can't see that right now, you're naive at this point. Whether it's lies, truths, half truths, distorted truths, lies, it's just somebody's agenda. It's a bias is what you're seeing, and they're pushing something very heavily depending on what source you go to. That's, I think, where we're at totally as a society overall. I think most people, most logical humans, just want the truth and what is real, and why are we just not doing what's beneficial for us. But yes, quickly interject, that's sort of where I was, where I am. And no, I don't believe we're told the truth all the time. I believe we're given a truth to the path that they want us to follow, that, and then that's what their end game is, and who knows what that even is. It sounds conspiracy, but for fuck's sake, call me a conspiracy theorist if you want. I just don't trust people in full. So that's where I stem from.
And no matter what side you're on, they're demonizing the other side. So no one is innocent in any of this.
No,
and the system is created to have the populace divided, so that we don't see ourselves as brethren, but we see ourselves as the enemy.
Right, and to not get political on it, the two-sided spectrum is divisive in itself. Everyone's got their own agenda in their own way. If there was true unity here, we wouldn't have this set up here in the United States, at least. So just to we'll move on from politics there, and then just let you go ahead and keep going.
So by May 2020, I heard of this. This is weird, but this is another thing that started it. So the COVID narrative was already shattering. I was already realizing that I don't think that I have been told the truth in the news. So what else have I been lied to about? That's what I was there by May of 2020. And by May of 2020, I heard about this documentary that had just come out, and it is called Out of Shadows. Oh, yeah. And I watched Out of Shadows, and it opened my eyes, that really we believe, and it kind of, the whole premise was, why do you believe what you believe? And it's because you believe what you believe because the news tells you what to believe, or the world tells you what to believe. And, Hollywood and the media drive a lot of the narrative and all that too. So it's kind of like, it gets you thinking anyway, why do you believe the things that you believe? And I remember that question standing out in my head. And before too long, my eyes, really started opening up more and more, but that's not my own doing. That's God's doing. He was removing the veil from my eyes, but not super all at once, because I think it would have been traumatizing to know that your whole life that you've lived is a lie is scary for anyone to realize. Mm-hmm. And so if atheism, we'll say, because I think I was flirting on atheism by then, is a cult in and of itself. It is a religious system, by the way. It's the religion of humanism. Mm-hmm. And so it's no different than coming out of like a Mormon cult, or if you're a Jehovah's Witness or something. If you only know this and your life is built on comfortable lies, when you start to have the truth presented to you, you can go one of two ways. You can run from it because you're comfortable in living the lies and you don't want to know. Or for me, it was, this is supremely uncomfortable for me to know I've been lied to. It was very humbling to know what else have I been lied to about, but I couldn't not go down that road.
Right. And and I wanted to interject really quick. That's a very mature way to handle that. And that's the best way to go. I think you took, if you notice, I think a lot of people, no matter what their beliefs are, when they're questioned or challenged, or they do come to this internal realization that they've been manipulated, lied to for any which reason, if to confront that is so scary and so fear-based that I just think that they turn to anger, accusation, and just aggression at the person that might be trying to pull that wool over their eyes. And again, probably 7 to 10%, 7 or 8 out of 10 people probably think we sound like conspiracy theorists, because that's the narrative of it all. And we're not going to go that route, even though I keep spouting it out, but I'm going to let you go. Yeah. That's where the fear comes from. That's that denial in their heads, where they just, it's so comforting inside to know.
If you don't go down the road of seeking what reality is, then you surround yourself with a confirmation bias. You basically stick to the 3 friends that think the same thing as you do, and you stick to the first 2 Google searches and don't go beyond that, right? Oh,
right. And nothing's more comfortable.
And then you're like, okay, this is really comfortable. I'm really glad to know that this is reality. It's in a lot of ways, it was a Truman Show experience. It's, this world I live in is a lie. I've been lied to my whole life, and I fell for it. Right. So, I'm 41 years old. I fell for this, and this is the ultimate humbling experience. And that is a fall. That's a big fall. Mm-hmm. to get that humbled. But God uses that because he says that we must humble ourselves to come to him. And I was not looking for God. I was looking for truth. It was super uncomfortable. I was not sleeping at night when I started realizing the evils of this world, like, kids getting trafficked and ritually abused. And then I started realizing the elites of the world actually worship Lucifer. And when I started, I won't get into that. But I will say, when I started seeing that, I thought, evil exists. I now know that true evil exists, and that these people, these elites, even if I don't believe it, and even if the rest of the world doesn't believe, like everyday people like me, doesn't believe that God and the devil are real, they do, because they're worshiping him, literally, ritualistically worshiping him. So if I started to see the world more through that lens of, it's really fallen, it's really evil, and doggone it, if the devil's real, then therefore God is real. Mm-hmm. And initially, when I came to God, like I say to you over and over again, I was not looking for him. I was looking for truth. And in my pursuit of truth, he, in his abundant patience and faithfulness and grace, allowed me to explore that, knowing that I was going to find him, because the truth is absolute. Mm-hmm. And he is real. He is our creator. And so he knew I'd find my way to him, and he was patient in that. And I'm so grateful. When I later got ravenous for the word, once I got saved, I'm now on my third reading of the Bible from beginning to end, and I cannot get enough. You cannot exhaust the gloriousness that is the word. And the book of John, which is the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verse 37, Jesus has a conversation when he's under this mock trial, okay? The Pharisees are insanely jealous over Jesus because of all the miracles that he has been displaying for everybody, and the healings and everything, and the teachings. His teaching is so wise, and they're insanely jealous that even though he had always been prophesied that he was going to come from the times of the Old Testament, they were blinded to the truth. They were blinded. And so they sought to kill him in their envy and jealousy. So when he had this mock trial, which ultimately led to his crucifixion, he says to Pontius Pilate, he says, those who are of the truth will hear my voice. And that is my favorite Bible verse to date, because that's how he worked on me. I was seeking truth, and I heard his voice. And so, though I was not seeking him, I found him. And when I came to that realization, wow, okay, so I finally realized I'm a sinner. I was confronted. It was like he had the kindness to show me all of my sins in a way that made me filled with godly sorrow and grief, but not to the point of despair, like, oh, I'm just wretched and there's no way out for me. It was godly sorrow, but not to the point of despair. And then I listened to this sermon online, which, I just thought at the time, yeah, I'm just going to listen to this, not realizing that was God in all of that and leading me to do that, because I hadn't been to a church in 20 years. And I listened to a sermon on the book of John, by the way. And during the course of that sermon, I felt as though I was the person being spoken to, as if that message was meant for my ears alone. And God was kind of showing me a movie reel of sorts of where he had been in my whole life, and that he had always been there patiently waiting for me to cry out to him, and that he was never going anywhere. And in his grace, all of that repentance that I had done, and I had all that godly sorrow, finally led to joy, because I heard the gospel. So it's kind of like, if I'm a doctor, okay, Mike, if I'm a doctor, and I diagnose you with stage 4 cancer, okay, and I say, Mike, you have stage 4 cancer, you are certainly going to die, then that's going to lead you to a lot of despair. Yeah. But the gospel, which means the good news, is the answer to that. It is the answer to, this is what we do with a human being that is going to spend eternity in hell apart from God, is the gospel. It is the good news. It is accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior, knowing that he died for your sins personally. Even if you were the only human being on the planet, he still would have died for my sins. He still would have died for your sins. He would have looked at you in the eye while you watched him die on the cross, and he still would have done it for you. Absolutely. That is love. So anyone who says that God is not loving does not know God, because he died for us an agonizing death. And so that blew me away, that he had always been there. He was just and loving. And I went from feeling this despair to having a solution to my diagnosis of death. Or, like I said, if I gave you the diagnosis that you're going to die of stage 4 cancer. If I in turn give you the solution, the cure, why wouldn't you run for the cure?
Right.
The good news is the cure. So I was like, if you think about, I think a lot in terms of movies, which is why I give you a lot of like movie references. Mm-hmm. The Sound of Music, that old movie with
Julie Andrews.
Yeah. So she's on the top of the hill and she's in her like flowy dress and it's beautiful. And she's dancing, she's twirling around with her arms outstretched and she's singing. That is how I felt coming to Christ. That is the honeymoon, the all-encompassing love that I felt that day, and I still feel 3 years later.
That's amazing. So to kind of get an idea I'm sure it's different for everybody. So how do you know? Did you have an aha moment? Was that sort of it when you felt like you were saved, or was it a gradual sort of process to where you just started uncovering different aspects about yourself in your life and just kind of realizing it's just organically in a way?
It is an aha, and it is not gradual, because when you, Jesus teaches, and he's speaking to one of the chief Jewish leaders, a Pharisee named Nicodemus, and he speaks to him and he uses the phrase born again. So this born again, I had never heard of it as a Catholic. Okay. I never knew what born again meant. I thought it was a made up phrase by people who frankly were in prison, who wanted to con people that they were Christians. Okay.
That's exactly kind of what the stigma, I think, of it is almost that this born again, the saved feeling is this. I think some people have like a stigma towards it. It's crazy almost. And it's like, oh, they're just,
I love that you said that.
They're just pretending almost even to be like, oh, I'm fine now. I just forgive me for all my old shit. And now I'm good. I think that's kind of what people think.
And before I got born again, I thought the same thing. I thought a lot of Christians were hypocrites. In fact, the man that I had the affair with was a self-proclaimed Pentecostal who went to church 2 days a week. And I chose that opportunity to dig my heels in even more against quote unquote Christians. I mocked Christians because I thought they were all hypocrites. Little did I know, Mike, that not everyone who gives themselves the labels Christians is a Christian. So It's just a label they assign to themselves, and it does not mean they've been born again. So according to God's word, which is infallible, Jesus says you must be born again. He could have said anything. So how do I know I'm born again? Because I heard the gospel. I responded to it. I accepted the forgiveness of Jesus, and I spoke out loud with my own lips. I confessed that he is Lord. I confessed that he died for my sins and that he rose again, because the grave could not hold him, because he was perfect and sinless, led a perfect life, the only human being to ever live a perfect life. Mm-hmm. And he granted me the gift of repentance, which means, it doesn't mean, hey, I'm sorry, God, I'm really sorry about those sins. It means you have deep contrition. You know you've sinned against a holy God, that you are accepting unmerited grace that he's bestowing on you, that you can't work your way to him, but you're turning from your sins. So it's not just, hey, I'm sorry, I can't wait to sin again tomorrow so I can say I'm sorry again. It's a change of your mind. He changes your mind and your heart about how you feel about the sins that you've committed. Okay. So what happened was, the sins and you don't have to clean up your life before you come to him, because I was still pretty messy before I came to him. He wants you to come as you are. Okay. So, because in your own strength, you can't clean up your life anyway. He does it for you. I was still deeply entrenched in sexual deviancy. I was addicted to pornography, and I'm talking hours a day. And hours a day, and masturbation and all that, like hours a day. It was abusive. It was abusing myself. And when I got saved, this is amazing, and I hope I articulate in a way you understand. I no longer wanted to do any of those things. And it was a light switch. It wasn't like I know this is a sin. I want to do it, but I'm not going to do it because I know it's wrong. It was, I know it's a sin. It's repulsive to me now because I know it goes against God's plan for me. And I have no desire to do that anymore.
That's perfectly stated. And I can relate to that because that's
I've
exactly.
been delivered. I have been delivered.
Oh, absolutely. And I can understand that thought process and what's needed to do that, because I had flipped that switch that you're talking about myself with, I've said it on this podcast before, and on social media with alcohol, is to where I know I shouldn't be drinking and it doesn't sit right with me, but I'm just still going to go ahead and do it here and there. I had to have that switch flipped where I don't want this anymore. This is toxic. This is terrible. And I think you had a very similar awakening through that, through where you were through getting saved. I think that's exactly the switch that needed to be flipped, for lack of a better term, that you need to come to something bodily, not mentally. We all logically know what's good, what's bad, what's sinful, what's evil, what's going to hurt us, what's going to hurt somebody else. We know that logically, but we have to actually feel that and separate our brains from what's inside in our bodies, and bodily have to come to that feel that this is wrong. This is not who I am. It's not what I'm going to do. So did I kind of encapsulate that somewhat to an extent of how you felt when you got saved?
To an extent, yes.
I'm
to an
sure
extent,
I couldn't.
I can explore further and just tell you, it was by no strength of my own doing in any way. It was deliverance. I mean that truly. I mean deliverance.
Effortless,
100% effortless. It fell like shackles. All the heaviness that I felt in my whole life fell like shackles. And I no longer felt that. I knew that I was at peace with Christ. Like I knew it, and I still know it. And so I don't have there's a lot of religions out there. There's a lot, right? And all of them, aside from Christianity, by the way, are works-based righteousness. How can I earn my way to God? How can I get right before God? And that's not the gospel. The gospel is put Jesus as your Lord. Let him run your life. He will bless you. You're not going to live a life without troubles, but now you can deal with them. You can wade through those troubles because he's with you and you have a personal relationship. I talk to Jesus every day, and I read his word every day. And I grow more in my faith through those things because I know him intimately. I know him in a way I never did before. And I know that he does not, and this is what I have to make known, he does not love you based on what you do for him. He loves you because of who he is, not because of who you are. So there is no shame involved. That whole phrase where people say Catholic guilt, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Because when you're free indeed. When you are saved for good. You are his. And nothing can take that away. Nothing. Wow. So it doesn't mean, I can't, the Apostle Paul says something along the lines of, so does that mean that we can basically just like rack up sins now and just live in grace freely? No, because we're supposed to be known by our fruit. So that's why you can separate the real Christians from the non-real Christians. Who's living an obedient life to God for his glory, and because they love him and because they want to be obedient to him, not because it's drudgery. Okay.
Yes. And so it's kind of like having a boss or something, right? Yeah. Like it's kind of like you want to be able to do something for yourself. It's not trying to please somebody like we would view something external, kind of like how we look for external validation. God is not an external validation, right? Like
here's an example. Let's say I give to the homeless. Okay. Let's say I go out today and I preach the word of God on the streets and I give to the homeless. God does not have a ledger. He's not going, okay, she earned more points with me today. I love her more today than I will tomorrow if she doesn't do this. It is not attaining anything through your own works. It is not. And so neither is, we don't willfully live in sin, but you're going to stumble. We are in a sin we're in a sinful world. We're still in our flesh until we die. So we will still sin. It's just your life should not be patterned by sin. Okay. So will I still stumble and sin? Yes. But I do not live a life marked by the sin that has defined my entire life before I knew him. Mm-hmm. When I had no regrets about the things I did to people and how I sinned against them or God. And now I live completely differently, and I have freedom and a peace that surpasses all understanding is knowing where you're going to go when you die. You don't have to guess, you know.
Right. And then I'm going to assume, as we potentially draw near to the end here of our episode, I do want to make an assumption that you are in a very peaceful place, and you feel as if you've kind of come to a point to where you're content with who you are.
Oh, Mike, I am who I am because I am who he's made me to be now. I live for him. I live for his glory, for his will. I say before I get out of bed, how can I live for you today? And do you want to know he does amazing stuff when I ask?
Yeah,
he does amazing stuff. And so it is not I'll leave it with this and just say, this isn't for any of your listeners like, oh, Susan, I'm so glad you found what works for you. That's really great. Pat on the back. I'm so glad you found what works for you. It is a one size fits all offer. Mm-hmm. Period. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through him. He is the only means to everlasting life and peace. And apart from Christ, you have no peace.
Well, that's fantastic and amazing. And, you've really inspired me here today to, dig further into this. I haven't been as engaged and as aware of my own self, despite my upbringing. So I do want to thank you immensely for opening up here on my podcast, this little thing I put together here. So I did want to ask too, before I close it down, would you be willing to give out any of your contact info for anybody that might have questions about being saved?
Yeah. Like, what do you mean? Like
email address or your Instagram handle or anything like that?
Yeah. Let me look up my handle really quick because I don't know what it is.
I know, right? I have to think about that because it's like saving stored numbers these days. You can't remember those things. But I will also, while you're looking at that, I'll also put her Instagram handle and potentially your email address on the show notes, as well as the Instagram post or story that we put up for this episode. So
do that because it is kind of long. You can put the up or whatever.
I'll do that. And if you
anyone who has any questions about my testimony or how they can, how can I be saved or how can I know God? Oh my goodness, please hit me up because I love to talk about Jesus. We love to talk about the thing we love the most, and he's what I love the most. So he's what I talk about.
That's why I wanted you on here, because I thought this was a great spot to kind of put everything in one place for you for me to gain some knowledge, for listeners to do the same. And if you didn't want to contact Susan directly, you can get in touch with me on social media at MFS Wellness. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. My email address is mike@mfswellness.com. So you can get to Susan through me, ask me any questions, and go from there, or give some feedback on the show if you've listened through. And so I'm going to sign off here for Susan. Thank you so much for being here. I greatly appreciate that. I'm Mike, and we will talk to you on the next episode. Thank you.